Time now for our Wall Street Week daily segment where the host of Wall Street Week, David Westin, flew down on his private jet from Greenwich, Connecticut today just to be here for us as he is every day around this time. And you were up at the Greenwich Economic Forum. You had a chance to sit down with Dalio, formerly of Bridgewater.
Yeah, it's always an interesting time to talk to Ray about his view of the world. And we talked about the whole world, including what's going on with the yield and the 10-year. But we also asked him about something he's focused on, which is like the disputes among countries right now and how they can affect global economy. So we specifically asked him about what's going on with U.S.-China relations and also the Middle East. This is part of what he said.
U.S.-China relations are in a number of areas on the brink of red lines. So, in other words, these irreconcilable differences, they're right on the brink. So if I was to take, let's say, the Taiwan issue, it's an irreconcilable issue, and so on. It's right at the line. The breaking point is if the United States said, we are in favor of the independence of Taiwan. That's the equivalent of a declaration of war. And because of our political issues that are now internally, you're going to be likely to push that because of the fact that many in Congress and so on would say, we will defend Taiwan at all cost and we will give them this, and you could even cross that line. My point is, it's right at the edge. That's that. We have a chips issue. And we have a technology and sanctions issue. The reason in World War II, war with Japan, you had the cutting off of the oil and then the sanctioning them taking their payments. So you have a somewhat similar situation. Chips is like oil back then, and it's a very, very, very delicate issue. You have the geopolitical issue, which also is manifest in each of them, and so on, supporting Ukraine, and other geopolitical issues, which are also right at the edge. Neither country wants to go to war. Everybody's afraid of what that war would be like, because it would be devastating economically and politically. So you will see sort of the postponing. These issues will remain and probably intensify over the next 5 to 10 years, but they will be at that edge. So you're going to see in November, there will be in San Francisco the APAC conference, and you will see President Xi get together with President Biden. But we have a political situation and so on, that's it. In China, they are also dealing with a number of big problems. As we're dealing with our problems, they're dealing with their problems. Those problems are first the debt problem that has now been allowed to pass through into the system. Meaning you have real estate, and real estate counts for about 70% of savings. People put their money in real estate, and about 20% of their economy. And there was a bubble, and then that's passing through, and that goes down to local governments that were living on debt, and also land sales for real estate purchases. And so that's a structural issue. They need to do a debt restructuring, and a debt restructuring is a very difficult thing to do. They can do it, but it's also very politically impactful, because those who are, whoever's making these decisions determines whose wealth and how they divide the pie. So you have that going on. You have a move to what President Xi calls the 100-year storm on the horizon. In other words, he believes there's a 100-year storm on the horizon. That's the sort of things that we're now talking about. And with that 100-year storm on the horizon, you have a very autocratic, in other words, if you don't behave well, you'll lose your head, and so on. And that kind of environment, which, by the way, in war periods and so on, has been what most countries have moved toward or something. And so that's having an effect on the economy. We have the U.S.-China conflict itself, which is affecting what companies do. Do I want to be in China, or do I want to be in Vietnam? That's one of the things that's benefiting neutral countries. So they think, okay, if the ASEAN countries, India and other places can be a beneficiary of that, where do I want to be? But that's also hurting them. And then, of course, that we have a world economy which is relatively slow moving. That affects their exports. So they're going through a very difficult period.
So let's try to end this on a high note. Middle East, of all places. Middle East. As I understand, you have an office now in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
There are a lot of reports about a possible deal, seems unimaginable, of Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States. Don't know if that's going to happen, but it looks like it might definitely be possible. If that happened, how could that transform, certainly that region, but maybe the global economy?
Well, there's a realization there that not fighting and prosperity is better than fighting depressions. So for very practical reasons, if you take MBS, MBZ in the UAE and so on, there's a desire to move in that direction, dealing with the geopolitical issues. Those geopolitical issues are to some extent within the region, having to do with Palestinian and so on, and to some extent worldwide, like in a conflict. So the movement, you saw a movement, Saudi Arabia and Iran. Whoa, that's a big deal. And now you're seeing that line up in that way with Israel. So as I say, there are three things that I'm looking for, right? Do you earn more than you spend? They do. Do you have an environment in which there's internal vitality and people working together and so on? A lot of changes have been made in these places to make that really, I mean, it's a vibrant place. These places are talent magnets. They're competing for talent and they're getting talent because of that environment. And are you in risk of one side or another of the war, or can you stay neutral? Because the neutral countries do better. So that's what they're benefiting on. Those countries are, they're doing very well. And there will be places in the world, India, ASEAN countries and so on, which will do very well while all of this is going on.